Hello and welcome. This is the update on my Emperor art journal. This series is called Art Journaling the Major Arcana. I'm wrapping up the last two spreads in my Emperor art journal, which is the card that I'm currently working on. And in this spread, I wanted to lean into the number 4 because the Emperor is the 4th card in the Major Arcana. This is also my 4th art journal in this series. So I took that as a synchronicity and thought about representing or just reflecting on the art journal thus far and working with 4s. So as I was thinking through this, the question that I'm answering or responding to is, what does order and authority look like across different systems? That's really a reflection. My previous pages have been more about nature, but this one I'm starting to think about more traditional aspects of the Emperor card as well as nature. So for the technical part of the art part of this, I guess, I draw out just a map of how I want these two groups of 4 to lay out. The left side is a little more structural with straight lines. The right side is a little more curved. I draw that out in the art journal. I take a piece of tracing paper and draw those shapes on the tracing paper so that I have a pattern essentially. And then I take each piece of the pattern and lay it on top of the picture that I'm going to cut out, and then cut out the pictures. So that's what you're seeing here, is where all those images are glued in. Now, if you watched the final flip through before you watched this video, the final flip through looks different. I changed some things. I'll just go through the elements on the left. The human systems that I'm representing are buildings for institution, a map that represents borders, governance, measurement, and ownership, a clock to represent timekeeping, schedules, civilization, imposed order, systems that regulate time, and then of course money, which is how we survive in all of these human systems. Well, not entirely, but you know what I mean, like it's part of the system. On the right side, the nature elements of authority, I'm repeating some of the things you've seen before. The mushrooms and the mycelial network for hidden communication and support for everything in the forest. The bees and honeycomb. The bees are social organization and collective purpose. And the honeycomb is perfect geometry created in nature. And then the forest and jungle pieces are just those ecosystems that self-regulate. So this page captures human-built systems, and the reason for that is because we need order, but nature already has systems. So I was just trying to join those two ideas. What you're watching here is how I reconcile the empty spaces between each of those pictures. I decided to lean into the more traditional colors, but when I say traditional, I mean the Rider-Waite-Smith Emperor card with the red, orange, yellow, and there's a little bit of white in there. I lean into those colors to do a gradient, and then I outline each shape with black, and this ends up changing in the final version, but you get the idea of what I'm going for here, of just trying to join all those colors with the different systems of order and authority. So this is the back cover of the art journal, and you'll see me doing some pretty straightforward collage basics. I'm using some warm white and cream color. You can't really tell on camera that that background is more of a cream ivory color, and some black and white, just to do a simple collage. I wanted this back page to be not only a reflection of the art journal itself, but I just was thinking about my dad and the page I did about fatherhood. It had me thinking more and more about fatherhood, and I wanted to include pictures of my dad and I in our journey through life as much as I could on a tiny page, you know what I mean? So here I'm just laying down that simple collage. I add in a piece of string that I plan on hanging pictures on, and the string ends up symbolizing a timeline for me. At first, I did the string because I was just thinking about, okay, well, how can I put pictures on without it being blocky? You know, it was just more of a design element. But once I added it and I looked at the pictures that I was adding, I was realizing, oh, this is a timeline, and it shows the journey of our lives, you know, and it was really interesting for me because I hadn't, you know, intentionally set out for that. So it's just, for me, it was very interesting that I happened upon this very emperor appropriate idea of authority and fatherhood, and how your parents' decisions have, you know, put you on the timeline that you're on for a lot of us, especially when you're younger. You know, you don't really have a choice. If your parents decide to move, you're moving too. And so that kind of got me into this whole timeline thing. The pictures I chose to add were one when I was a little baby and we were in California still. My dad is totally representing the 70s hardcore with his hairstyle and outfit. So that's going to be on the top left. Then there's a picture of he and I playing catch on the beach. I was big into fast pitch and played on a lot of teams, and he was always a coach. So that was a really big part of my childhood and our time together when I was young. The third picture is of my dad and I in Gibraltar standing next to a monkey, and I love the look on my dad's face because it's just like, this is ridiculous, but I'm gonna do it, you know, which is, again, very dad. That's a very dad thing. We lived overseas. I went to high school overseas, and that's another thing where had he not taken that job and had I not gone over there with him, I would have not met my daughter's father. I met him overseas, and who knows, you know, if and when I would have had a child, had I not met him and gone out there. I mean, that's a whole nother philosophical, like, let's not go there. Anyway, so, and then the last picture is I went up there last summer and we did a little selfie of my daughter and me and my sister and my mom and dad, and I covered up their faces because, like, I mean, I don't want, it's just out of courtesy for them. So anyway, getting back to the Emperor, this made me think about how authority is lived through the people whose choices shape our lives. And like I said before, like we all make our own decisions as we come into adulthood that changes, you know, our timeline and where we end up. But there's so many decisions that get made on your behalf that impact your entire life. And this is just sort of a reflection on that journey and some of the highlights along the way that I like to reflect on as I think about my dad and growing up. All right, this video is just about over. You'll see me here just do the final few things. I add glitter for good measure, and I'm really happy this one is over. It's, you know, I always like doing these, but the Emperor energy is pretty heavy, so I'm glad to be moving on. The next video I do will be a flip through. I hope you will watch that. Thank you so much for tuning in this long, if you have, and listening to me ramble, and I will see you in the next video.